Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got Crissman Loomis for round two. If you missed round one, it'll be in the video's description. Crissman is the owner and operator of Unaging, unaging.com. So today we're going to talk about a whole bunch of aging related topics. So let's jump into it. So what's on the agenda today, Chris?
So first, you're going to talk about a diet life expectancy study. Then I thought it'd be a good idea for us to talk about supplements and kind of what we think about them. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there of what everyone's taking, and I wanted to make sure that you and I put in our 2 cents worth on it. And then on healthy habits, like once you get beyond diet and exercise, what else is there that you can do that would make a difference?
All right, so I'll link to this paper in the video's description, but and I don't even have the title here, but I think it's impact of healthy lifestyle factors on life expectancies, and then I can't see what the rest is. All right, but nonetheless, gained life expectancy by increasing, and then a variety of factors: physical activity, smoking, diet quality, moderate alcohol consumption, and then BMI. So in focusing on diet, people who are in the highest, quartile or quintile of the alternative healthy eating index, women and men. So you can see that women who are in the highest quintile compared to the lowest had about a 4-year gain of life expectancy for the highest dietary quality. And then for men, it's it's 5-year gain for women because it's compared to Q1, which is the reference. And then for men, it was a 4-year gain. So that might not seem too impressive, but then there's another study that was just published. So you can see here, life expectancy can increase by up to 10 years following sustained shifts towards healthier diets. So when it comes to pushing that, and that's, they don't have any pretty pictures. I mean, they've got, they ranked, wanted them to rank. They looked at hazard ratio, all-cause mortality based on individual food groups. And this is actually the, so they have in the supplementary data, they have I don't remember off the top of my head in terms of what they adjusted for. I think this one isn't fully adjusted. When you look at the fully adjusted data, it's actually cleaner. So I don't know, maybe I'll share that one too, because I have that open. So what I'm finding is that the adjustment for as many variables as possible is the essential in these epidemiological studies. And I know that may seem superficially obvious, but most epi studies, like for example, using LDL as an example, they'll adjust for, the standards: age, sex, BMI, education, and then like hypertension, glucose levels, basically metabolic health. But then not all of these studies, whether it's LDL or this study or others, they won't adjust for all of the comorbidities. Many of these studies will leave out like deaths from lung disease or liver disease. And maybe that doesn't seem like a big deal, but reverse causation is a big, or potentially a big, impact on a lot of these associations. So like in the case, I guess we won't go through the LDL story today, but there's a study that was recently published with about 5 million people where they adjusted for like 14 different comorbidities. And when you look at earlier studies that show basically a J-shaped or U-shaped curve for LDL and all-cause mortality, or total cholesterol with LDL driving most of that, when you adjust for all of the comorbidities as opposed to some of them, the curve becomes like, it flattens out the bottom of that J, so that lower LDL is not associated, or lower total cholesterol is not associated with an increased cardiovascular disease risk. So anyway, with that in mind, the paper in the supplementary data for the diet life expectancy study, the 10 years, this is the more fully adjusted model: BMI, calories, or energy, age, sex, and the full spectrum, which reduces their sample size, because I think it was probably double or triple this in the larger set. But nonetheless, they go through all of the different food groups, and in terms of the longest reduced all-cause mortality risk versus better survival versus shorter. And it's actually, some of it is what you'd expect. Like, what's interesting is, not that I'm a pro-meat guy, I'm not anti-meat, but if you look at sugar-sweetened beverages in terms of, all-cause mortality risk, I mean, it's 65% higher risk. Significantly, you can see the confidence interval is greater than 1. And I mean, processed meat too. I mean, Peter Attia is high on his processed meat, and yet 45%. And these are the strongest associations with Now, granted, the processed meat he's eating, I guess, probably has no preservatives, and I don't know, how, what natural flavors they're using, but nonetheless, the two strongest associations are processed meat and, these sugar sweetened beverages, whereas red meat, not significant, confidence interval overlaps. White meat, not significant. And again, I'm not pro or anti meat. This is just what the data shows. But yet in the pop culture, there isn't this big drive for, hey, let's tax sugar sweetened beverages, or let's reduce intake, because now I'm going to sound like the conspiracy theorist, but you've got big food, right? Big food who doesn't want, right? So anyway, 10-year increased life expectancy with this study too. So if we're going to make a dent on pushing that, average life expectancy out, we've got one study showing 4 to 6 years for, women and men. This study showing 10 years. But then the question is, with the biomarker-based approach, can we push it out 15 to 20, add CR in there, add some circadian alignment in there in terms of when you eat, and a little bit of fasting potentially based on the animal studies, maybe push it out to 25 or 30. I don't know what the window is, but yeah, I just wanted to, this will probably be in a video at some point, but yeah, this is the hot off the presses. Yes.
So just going over it now, like some of the things that jump out, like one is the nuts at 0.45. It looks like it didn't reach significance, so it's a bit questionable, but the average result was the largest thing on there. As I've talked to, I think, about before and have noted from the epidemiological studies, the nuts dosage is very sensitive. So basically getting just what they say here is getting about one small handful or but less than an ounce, like almost an ounce a day is the best. And you see this here. My statistical analysis of it from another study says it's a 17% reduction in premature death. And you see here in quintile 2, it's 18% right on and significant at that level. That one matches expectations. Sugar sweetened beverages matches expectation. Though meat white is one that's kind of strange, right? Like some of these things have strange intermediate results. But then again, you see with the legumes then being healthy generally, but kind of questionable. Fish also being sort of borderline, which is something I usually think is good. But one of the interesting ones that stands out here also is the milk being actually generally healthy is another one that's a bit of a surprise, especially as you get into the higher amounts. Usually I see that as not healthy. That might be idiosyncratic. This is a UK study. So that might be something that kind of depends on the UK. But in general, I think it lines up. It'd be, it's something that I'll be interested to take a look after this and kind of see how it matches with the data that we have to date.
You've got the refined grains too, which, I mean, across the board, you can see Q2 significant, Q3, Q4, every quintile of higher intake is significantly associated with increased all-cause mortality risk. So, but that's easy, right? That's, for me, that's the lowest hanging fruit. Eat real food and exercise, right? That's, it's not specific enough. And like you were saying about the nuts, where, you've got Q2 being significant, whereas the higher intakes are not. It gets to this idea of, again, specificity. Like if you look at Q5, okay, sure, that confidence interval going, overlapping with 1. But when you see, so it raises an interesting thing that the hazard ratio is so low, it suggests, but the confidence interval is so high, is that there was a lot of variability within nut intake and all-cause mortality risk. But on the one hand, and again, I know it's not significant, so this is speculation, but it suggests that for a given population, there may be factors where the highest quintile of intake is indeed associated with the largest risk reduction. Whereas for whatever reason, people who are eating the most nuts, there's some variability in that. So for me, it's a matter of, how can you titrate? What are the variables? And this kind of ties into the alcohol story too, because there's a similar effect going on here also with the hazard ratio potentially suggesting a decreased mortality risk at lower intakes, but it overlaps with 1. But it suggests that there may be subpopulations of people, and again, it's not significant, so it's just a suggestion. It suggests that there are subpopulations of people that if you figure out what the external variables or the other variables are in addition to this that can impact risk to make it a significant thing, there may be an even bigger benefit, right? But what those other factors are, I can't say it. I have to do deep dive, right? So
Well, I mean, off the top of the head, the trade-off of nuts is the high calorie count of them, right? So then you might be seeing some people who are then eating far too many nuts. My dad often talked about one of his weaknesses was the jar of peanut butter on the counter that he'd come home after eating a tight calorie day and then get a big old glob of peanut butter because he was just hungry.
yeah.
So I think that's probably going to be what you're seeing on the top side.
The argument against that though is they adjusted the model for energy intake. So but it could be lots of
BMI as well, right?
yeah.
So
So even eggs here too, occasional eggs, Q2, significant reduction. And then you can see even Q3 and Q4 right on that borderline of a little bit of eggs potentially being good. But then you see Q5 highest. I mean, now it's significant. Too many eggs, not good, right? So
that matches up exactly with the epidemiological study I've seen to date, where it says that on the dosage of about an egg every other day or so is fine and might even be slightly good for you. And this, in fact, shows that the Q2 is better for you than being at the lowest egg consumption. But after about an egg a day, then from that, it's basically break even. And after that, now you're starting to see other effects. And that's probably going to be the cholesterol, right?
yeah, it could be. But so, I mean, granted, I'm the outlier and the N of one, right? But so I increased egg intake from 2 per week to 4 per week, and it didn't affect anything. No biomarkers, nothing changed. So
That's the sweet spot. 4 per week, you're at about every other day. So that's
uh,
exactly in the Q2. That's where I'm saying people actually did see benefit from it.
right, but you'd expect if that were true in my case, you'd expect to see some biomarkers with some, just some improvement, moving the needle in some direction, and
Mhm.
nothing, literally
Oh,
nothing.
it did nothing. Okay, it had no, huh?
Yeah. So, but that goes back to the context dependent, it could be, and no effect, obviously, clearly, no effect on my total or LDL cholesterol levels. In my case, I've got to really jack up my saturated fat, whether it's from coconut butter or other stuff, cacao beans, which is saturated fat too, to get my
Hmm.
HDL from my LDL and total cholesterol from relatively low 150 and like 80 for a total in LDL to get that to like 180, 200.
Hmm.
So it seems that eggs on the context of my, high fiber diet, no moving the needle on cholesterol. But for the average person who's probably eating 15 grams of fiber per day, because there's an inverse association between fiber and total cholesterol levels. So if you're on a low fiber diet relatively, and you go to more and more eggs, and I know people are going to say, well, the idea that increasing dietary cholesterol doesn't impact blood cholesterol has been debunked. But for some people, that may not be the case, where there is a dose response relationship depending on the background of other stuff that you're eating, like I said, including things like fiber. So that could be some of the story here, but speculation, right? I don't know.
Right. I'm not sure exactly on the color coding they're using for this because like I look at whole grains Q3 and it's like 82% and it's clearly under one, so it's a significant benefit. But then I look at vegetables Q4 and it's also green, but it clearly straddles one. So I'm not quite
Yeah,
clear how they
the,
did the coloring.
yeah,
Um,
I agree. The color coding here is a disaster. Like even the blues are their eat well recommendations, the UK eat well recommendations, which
oh,
just
okay.
yeah, and
Oh,
then yeah, I don't like you said, I don't know why the green would yeah, because yeah, whole grains Q2 and Q4 are significant. So why aren't those also green, right? So yeah,
yeah.
screw it. That's one reason I didn't show this in the video yet, because it's just there is some confusion to it, right?
So, but if you look at it, though, another interesting thing that is consistent with the epidemiological studies is that the vegetables and fruits and vegetables don't have that big of a boost overall. I mean, if you look at, for instance, even just having the Q2 quartile, second quartile of nuts, which gave you the 18% reduction in all cause, none of the quartiles for fruits or vegetables give you anywhere more than 10% reduction in all cause mortality.
Yeah. To play the devil's advocate there, I don't know if it's because of bias or the published studies or the published
Yep.
studies drive my bias, but most people are barely eating any fruits and vegetables. So we're talking about associations for
Good point.
maybe five total servings per day versus one or
Mhm.
two, which to me is like, comparing sick against sicker. I have another, I didn't open this tab up, but there's another study on fiber intake and all-cause mortality risk. And off the top of my head, I have to take another look at it, but I think fruit fiber wasn't significantly associated with reduced risk, which ties into what this data shows and what you're saying, but vegetable fiber was. But again, that's still on the lowest side of fiber intake. And I think the highest fiber in that study was like 40 grams. Like I'm double that at least. How do you put me into that context, right? So
Right. Well, I focus on the fiber, getting it from the whole grains and the legumes. The whole grains, as we've seen, have come out strong here. They're basically one or below in every quartile after the first. And the legumes, though, that's a mystery one. I think we're talking about the rarity thing, like the quintile 5. How much legumes are they actually eating? But that range there is the largest almost of any of the ranges. Like hazard ratio from 10% to 525% is
yeah.
not clear. But those are the real drivers, I think, for most people of fiber in the diet is the whole grains and the legumes. Um, it's hard to eat enough fruits and vegetables to get enough fiber before your stomach is full. I know not everyone is able to put away a half a kilo of strawberries like like you can.
Yeah.
So it's the legumes is where I've been focusing, and also on the whole grains, because I find that's very underappreciated. Getting like a slice of whole wheat bread is actually a wonderful, healthy thing. Feels like we've kind of forget about it in the rush towards whole foods. It doesn't look like a food, but it really is. Or some healthy breakfast cereals also can be outstanding. Not the Fruit Loops grant you, but like the Cheerios or grape nuts or some of those other things, or oatmeal can be excellent healthy foods.
But the argument there for at least someone like me is those foods don't satiate me at all. And they are processed. Like it's not ultra processed, but like so if you've got a cereal that's derived from whole wheat and it's quote unquote whole grain, ideally you can buy whole wheat berries. You just cook them up. You just put them in whatever you're cooking, and you just put an equivalent amount of So instead of having a slice of bread, which is like 4 bites and 100 calories, you put that. Well, granted, whole wheat berries are still calorie dense. Whole grains are about 100 calories an ounce, but at least you're getting legit the whole food versus whatever the whole grains, 12 grains of whole grains and Cheerios, right? I mean, literally eat the whole grain. But most
Right.
people aren't doing that. Most people aren't doing that.
Right. Well, I'm a big fan of the whole wheat berries as well. I have those every morning. Whole wheat berries, barley, and oatmeal is my standard bowl. So,
Nice.
but I actually go and recommend to people, some and myself as well, just a granola bar, hyper processed, added sugar, all of those things. But at least it is whole wheat, and the fiber there is quite high.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you on that. I don't know. I can put it back up, but so that for me, that's like the general recommendation versus I don't want to say the mic level, which is, eat real food. I see, even the
Mhm.
store-bought granola bars are just that they can be not satiating, right? So it's
Mm.
how many of those are you going to eat? Can you just stick with that one little strip? Or what I learned a long time ago was, what if I make my own, right? And for me, that's infinitely more satiating. Like, not
Mm.
necessarily, first of all, the oats being rolled oats, is is it so there's a difference, like Quakers rolled oats versus like steel cut oats, glycemic index, there's a difference.
Yep.
Pesticide use, like I don't know, I think it's a Consumer Reports or some website did a review on pesticides and oatmeal in the rolled oats. And I mean, the burden in most rolled oats brands of pesticides, I mean, it was incredibly high, even for some of the organic brands. Um, uh, so it's important to know which on the list have no pesticides, and
Mm.
I can hear people saying, well, so what, pesticides, conventional versus organic, the nutrient quality is not different. Sure, that is, there's data showing that, but I'm trying to limit, stuff like pesticides if I can. Whether that makes a dent or not, I take the gamble. But from my experience, the bars that you're getting, I mean, just not satiating. And when I make it at home, it's like, I have cocoa beans and the dates, which I make that homemade chocolate, and that satiates me to the point where I mean, granted, I could probably crush 4,000 calories of Reese's peanut butter cups, but knowing that I'm
Mhm.
eating the real food, it satisfies that urge versus, I can't, who can stop eating, even granola bars, right? So,
Well, that's one key to that I find is not to have too many. There was a time when I was eating, I had a high supply of granola of protein bars, and I found that basically the amount of them that I would eat in one sitting was largely determined by the variety of flavors I had, because I would just take one of every flavor. If I had two flavors, I'd have two. If I had five flavors, I'd eat five. So I currently have two kinds of granola bars, so I usually eat two granola bars.
you're on the marathon, you're on that marathon training diet. So it's like you need calories, you need quick calories. So yeah,
But
yeah.
the one thing I want to come back around to, I hadn't seen that Consumer Reports on the oatmeal. I had seen the Consumer Reports on some of the problems with rice and heavy metals and some of the things, but I hadn't seen the oatmeal. From the stuff that I had looked at before, actually, both legumes and whole wheat, whole grains were significantly better on having a very low pesticide burden compared with fruits and vegetables. And there was a study that came out, I believe it was in the last few years, that talked about the high pesticide residue fruits and vegetables versus the low pesticide residue. And they found very significantly that the high pesticide residue, and this is about a third of all the total intake, had more of a J shape in terms of the all-cause premature death reduction. And my feeling, instinct, and have no evidence for this, is that that's because at the low dosage, it doesn't matter. But they were then showing higher cancer rates as people had higher doses of high pesticide residue fruits and vegetables. And I think that's one of the main reasons why when we looked at the other page, as you talk about like 5 servings should be normal for fruits and vegetables, but we don't actually see that much of a benefit because I don't think many people are able to get organic. It's easy for those of us who are of the means to shop at whole paycheck, Whole Foods, um, every day to think, oh, well, of course it's all organic. But anytime you're going out and eating at someone else's house or a restaurant or anywhere other than your home where you have had the luxury perhaps of paying a premium for the organic food, it's not something you can count on, which is another reason why I tend to go towards the whole grains and the beans, which just naturally don't have as much pesticides with them.
So that's a good point. You'll have to, if you could send
Mhm.
the pesticide and the mortality data, that would be great. But so it might not be Consumer Reports, but it's something similar to that where they did an analysis of the pesticides. So
Okay.
we can post that too in the video's description.
Okay.
Cool.
Great. So, shall we jump then into supplements?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, this is kind of a fast comment. I mean, as I scroll, do my own scrolling through YouTube and see sort of all the health and nutrition experts, there's always the question of what nutrients do you take? And I recently wrote a post on Brian Johnson and his blueprint. And Brian Johnson takes over 100 supplements every day. And as I look at that, my general feeling for that is I want to catch all the easy to achieve gains through normal lifestyle, through eating the whole grains and legumes and a small handful of nuts first. And because my benchmark for everything is reducing premature death and reducing that risk, for so many of these new things, I have no idea. There's no volume that we could get a study for that would tell me whether it actually reduces premature death. And my confidence in saying, okay, well, they've taken a study of this particular supplement or this chemical. The joke that I make on the blog that I talk about is it's hard to tell the difference between some of these supplements in the name of Pokemon, like genistein, taurine, and other things. And they don't, whether that has a particular impact, whether it's actually reducing all-cause mortality or just moving a particular biomarker, perhaps in a unhelpful way or something that doesn't really make an impact, it's hard for me to see. So the only supplement that I take on a daily basis is glucosamine chondroitin, which is a knee medicine that's been around for decades, but it's commonly prescribed. And as a result, and it's another UK study from the Biobank in the UK, they can show that it has about a 15% reduction in all-cause mortality. And it seems to be clustered more around lung diseases, sort of COPD and pneumonia and other kinds of things. So that reduction, just from taking a little completely harmless with no side effects of any kind medicine, is going to give you a better overall result in reduction in premature death than maybe even getting restaurant fruits and vegetables that might have other things with them. So for the other things like the sort of the supplements of the day, when you're talking about metformin, which is a diabetes supplement, rapamycin, which targets mTOR, these are strong medicines, but they're strong medicines. They're prescription only at this point. So even if you ignore the overhead of trying to get something that requires a doctor's prescription in the United States, at least, they do have side effects with them. The rapamycin then is going to reduce muscle building, so you need to then cycle it and other things. And I've seen some studies that seem to say, yes, it's very beneficial for people who have diabetes. It's a diabetes medicine. But if you don't have diabetes, you're not going to get the benefit of that. And it's not really clear. And even if they did, they're saying that maybe it's like a 5 or 10% reduction in premature death, which I'm saying, well, I've already got glucosamine as a supplement, which does a 15% reduction. So I'm going to stick with that. But I am interested in the NMN, which is coming up as a new thing. And I know that you've been doing a lot of experimentation with the NAD. So with that, I want to pass it over to you and hear what your thoughts are on supplement and also your specific experiments of hacking your own NAD production.
All right, wait, but before then, so we can, hopefully you can send the glucosamine data, and there may actually be some data that it extends lifespan in mice. I could be wrong about that, but so we can put that in the video's description too. So in terms of like what the billion supplements that Brian's taking, unlike I hear your point about all-cause mortality data and extrapolating from the animal studies to humans. I get that, but in his defense, he's tracking biomarkers, right? He's doing it rigorously and he's doing it the right way to see, does it make a dent, does it make it not? But I don't think he has the appropriate control, which is, what does my data look like at my current, he can't start with the pre-blueprint phase Brian data of this is what all my data was, and my body composition was worse, and all of those things. His diet was worse, no supplements maybe. I don't know if he's comparing himself against that, but to take everything like, metformin, I mean, he's TRT, he's on metformin, I think he may be on a statin, which makes me think, dude, does anything in your body work normally without these things? Like, you're literally patching the dam, like you got so many holes, whatever the situation may be. So that's one. The other side of that, though, is, like I said, he's monitoring biomarkers. Now, I don't know, though, what's the magnitude of the effect by taking that stuff out. I don't know if he's done that experiment. Which things are actually making a dent, and, what's the consequence of long-term usage of these things, where maybe some of the damage could be irreversible. I don't know, maybe. And again, I'm speculating. There's no N of 1 longitudinal data or even animal studies that have done this. Well, I don't know animal studies, but okay, rapamycin, it'll extend lifespan in sedentary mice in a cage. Granted, not to the magnitude of CR plus fasting plus circadian alignment, but if you take that, if you take that in the short term and you get a transient improvement in biomarkers, and that's a big if, what's the chronic effect of doing that for 30 years? Like, and if there are things in your biomarkers that change, that may be even more difficult to change because you're taking something in a super physiological dose that you would never see this in the wild. Are there some negative effects? Now, maybe the answer is no, and I'm wrong, which is fine. I'm happy to be wrong about that. But on these things, I don't want my existence to cease to exist because I've taken some exogenous agent, which I would never see. And I've basically, for a lack of a better term, effed myself with some prescription meds. I try to take the lowest risk strategy, and then, add with the targeted supplementation on top of that. And then, even with the targeted supplementation, which goes into the NAD, NMN, nicotinic acid story, even with that, I may take those things out that may have an improvement in some areas, but make other areas worse, right? With the goal of still changing it by diet. So the NAD story is that based on what quote unquote youthful is in blood cell NAD levels, which the common criticism there is you don't know what your tissue levels are, which is a fair point, but there are studies showing that an increase in blood NAD can link with tissue levels of NAD, and we want to have it relatively high in the tissues. We don't want to have low levels of muscle NAD. We'll have low levels of muscle energetics and so on, right? So, but I am doing metabolomics data too to try to get more insight beyond the blood versus the tissue. It's not a full picture. We'd have to do muscle biopsies, which is impractical. So relatively low levels of NAD, 20 to 25 micromolar without supplementing anything. And this is on my, mostly youthful biomarker-driven diet. And exercise training, which is shown to increase NAD, still relatively low relative to 30-year-olds who have somewhere around 40 median values, mine 20 to 25 without doing anything. So I found the nicotinic acid works. I started that experiment with 600 milligrams per day, but on the same day, my Dunedin pace, epigenetic pace of aging, was like 10 standard deviations from my 9 test average without that test, suggesting I drove it into outlier status. So then I shifted down 60 milligrams of nicotine.
Yeah.
10x reduction, still got an increase for NAD to the same magnitude as 1,000 milligrams of NMN, which the internet seems to love NMN and, thinking it's the panacea of all things anti-aging. 60 milligrams nicotinic acid, same effect on NAD as NMN, 1,000 milligrams. So then I sent blood for NAD. In terms of NAD, all right. So wait. So that's the low dose. So then, what about is it a high nicotinic acid, 600 milligrams per day, and the corresponding high NAD, which was 67 micromolar on that day of the test with the worst Dunedin pace? Is it high nicotinic acid? Is it high NAD? That's potentially messing up with the epigenetic pace of aging? I don't know. So to test that, I then went with 2 grams per day of NMN and got my NAD to 61 micromolar. So then the question is, all right, if it's a high NAD story, the Dunedin pace should be messed up. I don't have that data yet. I sent it. Should be coming on January 10th. Still
waiting.
Yeah, still waiting. Not much longer, but the pop, the internet seems to think that it's going to be a high dose nicotinic acid story, because if Dunedin pace is around my usual, 0.8, 0.78, 0.76, somewhere in that range, 0.82, then it's not a high NAD story. It's a high nicotinic acid story. But the good news is nicotinic acid in lower doses, 60 milligrams per day, doesn't seem to mess up my Dunedin pace. I think it was like 0.82 on that day, which is in the ballpark of which still isn't 0.6, like some of these guys like Seamland and others, which is the goal. But so to get around that, I've been on the it's hard to say, trigonelline, which I have a recent video about, which potentially could increase NAD. And that's a dietary change. So it would get around, if I could increase NAD and not mess up Dunedin pace by increasing trigonelline through diet, that'd be a fantastic way to get around this whole nicotinic acid messing up Dunedin pace in my case.
So what's your safest best bet for increasing NMN or NAD right now with what you know?
Hopefully trigonelline. Hopefully trigonelline.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the dosage?
It's probably about 20 milligrams per day from diet, whereas before it was like 0, almost like 5 milligrams. And then you could say, all right, that's a 15 milligram per day difference. Is that going to make a dent? But remember, 60 milligrams of nicotinic acid raised my NAD by 40%. So
what are the dietary sources of trigonelline again?
So you're going to like this one. Coffee is the most abundant source by far. It's like 2200.
Really?
Yeah, 2,200 micrograms per gram, but I think that's dry weight.
I've been telling you. That's what I've been telling you. You should be drinking that coffee.
Yeah, I've been considering it more, but it's a hard sell for me because coffee breath is just it's just rank for me. And you brush your teeth afterwards, but it stays all day. People, if I'm around people that have drank coffee, I'm like, oh, God, I just can't do it. But so then second on that list is chickpeas, which goes to legume story.
Those are great. There you go.
Yeah,
okay.
And the story gets better there too, because I have elevated IgGs, food sensitivities against many beans, like kidney beans, navy beans. Actually, navy beans have higher levels than chickpeas, but my IgGs are just way off the chart there. So, and I was going to put that data in a video, the screenshots of the IgGs and the beans, but it would be a too long video. So, anyway, so chickpeas 350 micrograms per gram. So I've actually taken, but then I've got to move around calories in my diet because I'm trying to stay eucaloric or less. So barley and oats have significantly less trigonelline. Barley has almost none. And
Grains. Okay, very good.
so I'm substituting all the whole grains for chickpeas to get that. So whether that'll make a dent,
Huh.
and the people that have been, saying where are the legumes, blue zones, and all cause mortality, where is that in your data? Now we're going to see, so will it be enough? I don't
Good.
know, but that's the
Well, it's inspiring seeing you kind of pushing the levers and fine tuning it. So I just wish you could test that stuff faster.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to have that stuff, in my, I could just do it immediately and have the answer like, within days, but one can hope, right? That's coming.
Right. Okay. Well,
But maybe
then,
the trigonelline doesn't make a dent at all, and then I just have to go with a small dose of nicotinic acid. And but the trick there too is the methyl donor thing. This goes to the idea of supplementation too. So so if for people supplementing with NMN or NR or niacin, nicotinamide, or nicotinic acid, that's well known to deplete methyl donors. So it's all over the internet too, and there is published data that supports this, that when supplementing with NAD precursors, it can deplete methyl donors, leading to increases in things like homocysteine, which could potentially affect methylation age too, because methylation age is clearly, it's a hyper or hypomethylation process, right? So
right, and homocysteine is one of the leading indicators for overall cardiovascular issues, right?
yeah, that's right, definitely. The RCTs don't show any improvements though, which is tricky because so reducing homocysteine doesn't show, from my reading of the literature, and it's not a comprehensive review, but that's generally the argument against homocysteine as a biomarker. It's what did the RCT show? But these are in generally already sick populations who have some pre-existing condition. So maybe homocysteine lowering in that case isn't a big deal, but my goal is prevention and minimization of risk. So,
Mhm.
can I delay any vascular related complications from elevated homocysteine, rather than I have elevated homocysteine and now I'm going to try to improve my mortality rate? So I'm trying to prevent. So I think it's a different story. But so the TMG, trimethylglycine, is what people are like, take TMG, take TMG. Well, I've done that experiment. It didn't work for me. I took up to 3 grams per day. Homocysteine didn't budge. I've also done the serine plus B6 to pull homocysteine down away towards glutathione. That didn't work either. 6 grams of serine and like 40 or 50 milligrams of, which is like 13x my B6. That didn't work either on homocysteine. Methyl B12 does reduce my homocysteine by a bit, but it goes to this idea of, what are the methyl donors that are specific that you can take if you're trying to improve NAD or you have elevated homocysteine, that are specific for you. Maybe it's not TMG. Everybody thinks TMG. It may not be. Now, along those lines, I've also added, which again, it's going to seem like a simple change or addition, but I've added oranges into the approach. I actually cut the strawberries down and added an equivalent amount of oranges. And I did that because oranges have proline betaine, which is at the end, you have a couple of methyl groups. Now, can that act as a methyl donor? I don't know. And that's not the only amino acid that is di or trimethylated. Like trimethylglycine has 3 methyl groups attached to its nitrogen. Proline has
Mhm.
2. There's tryptophan betaine, which has methyl groups. So there are many amino acids besides glycine that are di or trimethylated that can potentially act as methyl donors. Is that going to be enough from 100 grams or so of oranges per day? I don't know. I'll find
So what
out.
are- what are you, what are you hoping to see in your metabolics that would change as a result of moving from the strawberries over to the oranges? Like which of the you're just going to see it in the homocysteine you're thinking, or where are you going to see that show up?
So that's an interesting question because, I look at correlations between diet and the blood biomarkers. And in a panel of 25 biomarkers, strawberries have a net positive correlative score with 11 of those in terms of how they change during aging and all-cause mortality risk. Now, that's unadjusted correlations. I haven't adjusted for body weight. Body weight may be driving some of that as strawberry intake has increased as I've cut body weight down. And body weight seems to be a big driver of improving biomarkers in my data. So the risk though is, if strawberry is driving some of those correlations, I've reduced their intake and now increased it with oranges. So I may get some, reduction of positive effects by reducing strawberries with a small isolated effect, if any, for oranges. but homocysteine is that primary driver just through the proline betaine to increase proline betaine, which my diet had basically none of beforehand. And if you look at my Horvath epigenetic age and my homocysteine data without any B12 or additional folate, it does suggest I have some methyl donor inadequacy or deficiency. So I've got to try to, and then it gets to this idea of diet specificity, maybe the 20 ounces of strawberry.
A vegetarian diet, the deficit of B12 is one of the first things that you're warned about with a vegetarian diet, or a vegan diet, is that you might not be getting enough of vitamin B12. So it's completely understandable. Yep.
But in my case, remember, fish, I've got fish every day. In terms of B12 intake compared to the RDA, I'm at like 5x the RDA without supplements. So it's not a vegan diet. And actually a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it goes to the idea of, and it may not be a B12 issue at all. It may just be methyl B12 has some methyl donors. I need to have a boost in methyl donors for whatever reason. And I'm not really fixing the problem. I'm open to even taking out the methyl B12 at some point and just trying to still tweak the diet and get more methyl donors.
Okay, great. So let's continue on and talk about some of the other things that we have, sort of the beyond the food and beyond the exercise. So I'll start off on this to sort of give an example on this, because it's something I've been thinking about, is what are the things that we can talk about as habits that are healthy, but are beyond just going to the gym and the kitchen. So one of the things, for example, and this has been become popular lately, is the sauna as a term of all-cause mortality reduction. And the studies of this, and we'll link them below, are mostly from Finland because they have a strong sauna culture there. But the data is quite compelling. They have RCTs that show things like improved lactate threshold and VO2 max, which is a really good measure of cardiovascular overall health. And they say they have studies there that show that going to the sauna about 4 to 7 times a week, and they have the baseline is quite funny because there aren't any people they could find, like in a city of 4,000 people, they could only find 2 people who didn't go to the sauna at least once a week. So the baseline they're comparing to is people who go once a week. But even so, the people who went 4 to 7 times had a 40% reduction in premature death. So one of the things that I've added to my overall schedule is that I go to the sauna regularly. Here, where I live, down the street, there's a local bath. I'm in Japan, so there's a local bath that has actually a sauna in it. But the thing that's interesting is that I found some other studies that show other similar effects for other ways of heating the body. So it seems like the sauna is actually a way that your body, to fool your body, hack it, if you will, into thinking that you're still doing exercise. So the study refers to wearing a sauna suit, which is basically wearing a trash bag so that you continue to sweat even after you exercise. And it compares going to the sauna, wearing a sauna suit, and also just taking a hot bath. So sitting in a hot bath of that nice toasty bath for a long time. And in the last actually couple of years, they've had a study that's been released in Japan that showed similar cardiovascular benefits, not as strong as the sauna, but similar, where they're showing increased benefit as far as reduced strokes and heart attacks and other things from just people who are getting lots of baths every night and evening, as traditional here. So that's one of the things that I do that's further than that. The other things are would be the dental care is another thing where they have strong reductions of premature death. And I especially like this one because it's different from the other studies. Oftentimes people think, well, yes, of course, if someone takes good care of teeth, they're taking care of their body as a whole. They're seeing the doctor all the time and all these things. But actually the specificity about it is that brushing your teeth is helpful for longevity when done in the evening. And only in the evening. Like if you brush your teeth in the morning, that's great. It helps for fresh breath, maybe gets rid of the coffee smell in your breath. But it does nothing for your longevity. It's only when you brush it in the evening before you go to bed. And there's other things as well. Flossing your teeth once a day at least is healthy and reduces premature death. And then there's other ones that are sort of not what you'd expect. For instance, mouthwash. And you recommend Bristle on your YouTube channel quite often for measuring the oral microbiome. And I've talked with the scientists there, and they echo this, that actually a mouthwash doesn't show any benefit in terms of improving the oral biome in general. And the all premature death studies find that as well, is that yes, it's great to brush your teeth, that will extend your lifespan, but doing a mouthwash doesn't seem to have any effect at all. So those are two habits that I find to be quite helpful as terms of all-cause mortality that have the numbers to back them up that I make sure to incorporate in my daily routine.
So wait, so starting with the sauna, I was just taking notes because I didn't want to interrupt. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I haven't focused on the sauna in terms of like videos or information because it's already so saturated. Like, Rhonda's got
Yeah.
like hours of content on sauna. The initial flags that pop up in my mind are what's the BMI of that study? What's the BMI? Because I think the data is probably an overweight people who maybe have hypertension or pre-hypertension, and I can see a road where that may be the sauna would have benefit for that specific group of people, and
Mm.
especially like overweight or obese, just BMI greater than 25, probably not fit or active. So in that case, it's like, when you exercise, you're going to get the increase in body temperature, and then increase in body temperature may be part of a vasodilation program where you should be able to reduce blood pressure over time, whether that's because of the heat or other health promoting effects of exercise. The
Mhm.
just and then this is again speculation, but I haven't read those studies. I haven't paid attention to it, but I hear the sauna story everywhere, right? But from my experience, at least here in the States, the people who are most likely to use the sauna are these overweight, don't exercise, out of shape, and again, maybe have some. So I can see a road where that's beneficial, but then it gets to the idea of, um, you know, if you take someone who's not hypertensive, not overweight, already lean and fit, if you have that group and now they're in the sauna four to seven times per week, and maybe even like a randomized crossover trial where you have them sauna, then you have them go out of the sauna for a few weeks so that you're seeing if there's an effective improvement, and then does it come back to baseline? I don't know. Do those studies exist?
I mean, they have the studies there, the interventional ones where they're doing an RCT, and these are standard RCTs. So these are being done probably on, honestly, college students. I haven't actually reviewed that. Doesn't mean they're not 25 over 25 BMI, but of course they're all controlled for the BMI. That's standard, right? Um, so it's an interesting thing. But for instance, the studies that are talking about the bathing in Japan, which is one of the thinnest countries in the world, is not going to be subject to that. That's probably going to be fairly clean as far as most of the people are low weight. So I think there's something in it beyond just sort of dealing with a higher BMI. And it does seem to be beneficial to do it after aerobic exercise in particular. The sweatsuit and hot bath and sauna study that I saw was talking about this specifically, about doing 15 minutes after going for like a 30-minute run or so. But it's something worth looking at.
And then the other question is, which biomarkers besides blood pressure, and I guess maybe you could look at, I mean, the ideal, if it's a cardiovascular disease risk kind of thing where it's reducing that risk, I mean, you would look at soft plaques or even calcification. Like, I just don't know if there are studies showing some, effects on those cardiovascular related outcomes besides blood pressure. Like, I just don't know what biomarker, how would so subjectively, it feels good when you heat the body up like that and even after a sauna, like, but for someone to say, oh, it works because it makes me feel good. Okay, that's a different story than what's the objective data actually show in terms of,
Well, I mean, I've actually doubled down and have increased my sauna time as I'm getting ready for this marathon because of the benefits on the VO2 max, which is your cardiorespiratory health, which is a key driver of marathon performance. So I've been doing that, and also it raises the lactate threshold, which is sort of the point at which you start to get your muscles get sore from overexertion. The other endpoint that they've been looking at, aside from the premature death, is also in the sauna studies, they've been looking at specifically cardiovascular death, so death from cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and other things. And in the Japanese bath study, they were then looking at just stroke or cardiovascular events, not going so far as death. And I think that's probably because they don't have as quite as strong. I think probably the sauna is more effective, but just a hot bath is a good measure and much more convenient for the great majority of people than finding their way to a sauna after doing exercise.
Yeah, so that ties into probably blood pressure and some, slowing of atherosclerosis if it does. But what if your blood pressure is already normal? I get the argument for, the VO2 max potential benefits there. I mean, probably pro athletes should be doing this stuff, pushing your VO2 max even a few units higher is going to have benefit in that case, right? But if my VO2 max is 50 versus 52, is that going to really make a difference on longevity versus the time commitment? And not just that, what's crazy is I see some people, I'm not anti-sauna, and I'm just being skeptical, right? What's that guy's, Robert Shermer, I think his name is, the skeptic. Yeah. Anyway, that guy is just always a skeptic about everything. I'm not trying to be that guy, but um, so I just had something in terms of sauna. Um, anyway, just playing the
Yeah,
skeptic.
fair enough. All right, so
Oral. So oral,
go
oral
ahead.
care. Yeah. So in terms of, so yeah, I get you on the brushing and the flossing, regular cleaning too. How often, whether it's every 6 months, every year, that can contribute too, because the plaque buildup, you want to get rid of that, you keep that at a minimum. But yeah, taking that a step further, it's in my case, trying to, well, in the first case, get rid of this bacterium that's consistently 95% of my oral microbiome, which I think to me is a potential time bomb, ticking time bomb, where maybe my mouth
Hmm.
and system won't be able to keep it limited. Sepsis it can cause sepsis. Anyway, trying to eliminate this thing, and then people are like, why don't you take antibiotics? All right, so maybe I kill off. First of all, it's oral. It's not a topically applied antibiotic. I would eat it. It goes to my gut. I'm going to obliterate my gut microbiome, which is a problem, allowing
It's
potential.
precious. You've built that up over years.
Yeah, right. I've built that garden over years. I don't want to just get rid of it. But then,
Yeah.
some of it will indeed impact my oral microbiome, potentially eliminating that bacteria. But the other side of that is antibiotic resistant Serratia, which is an even bigger nightmare. And I say that as someone who studies the microbiome, and, getting rid of antibiotic resistant bacteria on its own is a problem. That's like a particularly nasty bacterium once it's antibiotic resistant. So the race is on to get rid of it. But then, assuming I didn't have that in my oral microbiome, there are certain bacteria that have been linked with Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, whether they're found in the brains of Alzheimer's disease patients or found in the plaques in cardiovascular disease, or can specifically cause it in mice like P. gingivalis. So, yeah, making sure that I get rid of the Serratia, and then once I'm back to a normal microbiome, keeping these bacteria that have been linked with poor systemic health atop the list.
Mhm.
To me, that's the cutting edge. It goes beyond, brushing and flossing, which, but the idea too of mouthwash, the
Mhm.
store-bought mouthwashes that contain things like alcohol, which many
Yeah.
do, which, there are published studies showing that can affect blood pressure. So basically, you're killing off oral bacteria, and those oral bacteria have some positive role on regulating blood pressure systemically. So, yeah,
Interesting.
alcohol-based mouthwashes I'd stay away from those.
Right. I stay away from them in general. Because some of the other ones that aren't alcohol based and are still kind of based off of um kind of strip and basically kill the entire microbiome, which is where, as we've talked about, you want to cultivate the positive bacteria as opposed to just nuking everything and then hoping the good ones grow back, right?
But that kind of gets into the idea too of, okay, alcohol and mouthwash is bad, but then, toothpastes are loaded with like these, sudsing agents, sodium dodecyl, whatever, sulfate, and other stuff like that. So I haven't done a deep dive there. And I'm sure there'll be people in the comments saying, just take some coconut butter or coconut oil and mix it with sodium bicarbonate and brush your teeth. I don't know that that's the best either. There are no RCTs on that, right? Um,
Yeah.
but there are things in toothpaste, that, whether it's additives or preservatives, like for example, the whole preservatives impacting gut bacteria. And that could be true too in terms of the oral microbiome, because it's so understudied. Um, they're just, who knows what's good or what's bad in terms of, what a toothpaste should even look like, right? So yeah, figuring that out is on the to-do list.
Okay. Right. So, what else should we cover today?
What do we
You
got? What
want
do we
to
got on the
talk about
list?
alcohol?
Aha, alcohol. All right, let's see. Got to share screen.
As long as we're talking about something more serious than just the alcohol in your mouthwash.
Yeah. So first, in one of the life expectancy studies, it's
Mhm.
this one. Let's start off there. Um,
Mhm.
let's see. Hard for me to. Okay. So yeah, this is the study where it was, and again, it'll be linked in the comments. 5 factors that increase life expectancy, men and women. So here, gained or lost life expectancy compared to moderate alcohol consumption. So that was the referent, right? No alcohol, and then you've got the highest intake. So light blue and red. So for women, um, what was it here? You can see that there's a loss of life expectancy for the highest alcohol intake, 30 grams per day. So what is that? A glass of wine is about 12 grams per 100 mils. So, it's like 3 drinks per day, reduced life expectancy. Similarly for men. But in men, you can see, well, actually for women too, light blue, no alcohol, almost just as bad for life expectancy as 2.5 or so drinks per day. But even there, even in this study, there's no gain in life expectancy with alcohol intake. It's just minimizing a small loss, if any, 2 years or so for the abstainers, which is a very mild effect. But okay, this is just one study. And then I've got another here that was recently published, right? Association. There we go. Right. Now we're in business. Okay. So meta-analysis published in March 2023. And this is the largest meta-analysis that I've come across, 107 studies on alcohol, all-cause mortality, 4.8 million people. So in contrast with the earlier meta-analyses, low volume alcohol drinking not associated with protection from death from all causes. So scrolling, I know I got the perma scroll here, but let's see. So they separated it. All right. I don't know if you can see this now. Can you see E figure 4?
Yep.
So I don't know why this data is slightly different from what their main results are in the paper. I mean, I'd have to go through the tables. I know in one of the tables they defined the groups differently. So you've got non-drinker, occasional, which is like 1 drink per week, less than 1.3 grams per day. So you can see compared to a non-drinker, a very occasional, not associated with a reduced all-cause mortality risk, but you can see and that's you want to see the fully adjusted, right? So this is a solid line that would be here. And then the confidence interval, you can see it just barely crosses 1, so not significant. So that's maybe 1 drink per week. Then you can see the low volume group for the fully adjusted model, up to 2 drinks per day, significant reduction in all-cause mortality risk. So, but then above that, 25 to 44 grams per day, we've got increased risk. So you can see that's above the hazard ratio of 1, the confidence interval. And then you've got significant increases for greater than 45 grams of alcohol per day, which is like 4 drinks per day. So, but in the study, in the main study here, I don't know why I can't open this as a PDF, but the way they define the groups, whether they define, I think if they define the referent as the occasional drinker, then the low dose for up to 25 grams per day wasn't significant. And the reason they use the occasional drinker is because I guess there is some selection bias in abstainers where they used to drink and maybe they stop because they're sick, and there's some reverse causation in that. Whereas if you go with the occasional drinker, I guess that's minimized. So when the reference group is the occasional drinker, the low volume group wasn't significantly associated with reduced risk. But I think there, like the plot showed, there is that trend towards having a lower risk with the low volume alcohol intake. You can see it's just outside the confidence interval being less than 1, which again goes to the idea of what are the other variables where a very low intake of alcohol, what are the other variables that help you actually reduce that risk by 7% in this case? I don't know what that would be, so.
Yeah, it's been this is an often referred to study. I'm pretty familiar with myself. The interesting thing about this is that when they originally started the study, they were trying to say that if you look at someone who has a quitter, sick quitter is the term they
Yep.
use. They say that alcohol looks like it's healthy only because it's compared to people who were drinkers but quit because they were unhealthy, and therefore they're saying that that is the comparison. It's people who are already sick. But this study is very clean, that it took people who were abstainers, and then you also have lifetime non-drinkers. Now they've never drunk a drop, so it's not possible that they've just quit because of some other thing. And they found in this case as well that basically the people who have are infrequent, drink occasionally, but maybe once a month or so, versus the low volume, have a benefit, especially against the people who have never drunk, lifetime abstainers. The people who used to drink but quit are the worst, usually, because of the reasons that they talk about, where they were unhealthy before. The former drinker versus abstainers is what we see here, right? But then they shifted again to say, okay, well, let's see how about people who drink a moderate amount. How do they compare to people who drink just occasionally? And you're right, they don't find that there's significantly difference, but I would say that basically you've already proved the point that low amounts of alcohol are fine, whether it's occasional, less than one drink a day, or whether it's 1 to 2 drinks a day or less. Basically, it's shown that it is a beneficial, and they see it in some of the cardiovascular studies and some of the other things. And everyone agrees that once you get over that, and I do that on a semi-regular basis with my friends as well, so not everything is strawberries all day long. But it's part of the normal thing. But it's something to be aware of, is it does seem to have some benefits in that low range. And if it's something that you enjoy, you should go for it. Harvard has a very good write-up on this that we should link in the post as well, that talks about there are some benefits at a low basis, but clearly not if you're in any way at risk of going into the higher numbers where all that benefit would be lost and the damage to the family and your livelihood could be severe. Um, so I like this study quite a bit because I think it brings up that clear point. In the later studies, then they do what I call P washing, where even beyond this, where they've taken out the lifetime abstainers and shown that there's a benefit, then they add in like another 6 or 13 different categories, and they do something that I call P washing, which is where you basically reduce your group down so much that the significance is lost. You're reducing the power of your study, and so at that point, then you say, well, there's no significance, so there's no benefit. Well, okay. I mean, in some ways, I say that in the worst case, you could say about moderate drinking is that it's no better. And so if you really enjoy it, then you shouldn't stop it because you think there's a harm to it. At best, this would only be able to show that there's not a direct harm for it, as opposed to the poisonous at any dosage kind of things, which I think is clearly not the case. And we should save our efforts for places where it's really going to make a difference in premature death, as opposed to something that, if you enjoy it and are able to do it within a controlled fashion, is something that you could enjoy as part of your life.
Yeah, no, so that's a good point that you made, that uh it's not associated. So at worst, the low volume group, 1.3 to less than
Mhm.
25 grams per day, there's that it's not significant, but there is it's not significant does suggest that it's clearly not harmful. You don't have an increased risk, but there is that trend towards a decreased risk. So but like you said, if you've got, alcoholism or whatever in the family, and staying away from the higher intakes, because that's associated with increased all-cause mortality risk, let alone the damage to family. So actually, alcohol is a potential option on my to-do list too. And but I've
Oh,
got
okay. Gonna get you drinking coffee. We're gonna get you having a beer in the
yeah.
evening.
So DHEA sulfate, it so it declines during aging, and there is some evidence linking alcohol intake to relatively higher levels. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing because, but the idea that it could potentially move the needle towards improving it a little bit. And the reason I raise that is because the testosterone is derived from DHEA, which is derived from cholesterol. So my testosterone levels are youthful, total testosterone youthful. So I don't have it. I clearly don't have a problem in going from cholesterol to DHEA to testosterone. So because to get to testosterone, you have to go through DHEA. So, but that my DHEA sulfate is, more than half of what it was in my 20s, early 30s when I have data, just 2 data points. But I don't know if that was with DHEA supplementation or not. But it's clearly lower. It's 50% lower. Now, granted, I've maintained it over the past year or so, but knowing that it declines during aging, I do have a window for adding a very small amount. I'm not talking 25 grams per day. What's the minimum amount of alcohol that would move the needle in my case, where I don't mess up heart rate variability, resting heart rate, because, I'm sure there's an abundance of anecdotal data, people saying, look at my data, just one drink data, so I don't want to mess that stuff up, but there may be a small dose, like, less than 100 milliliters per day, far less. I mean, maybe half that, where I'm open to including it to try the experiment.
So for myself, I do follow the moderate on the days when I'm moderate. I do just have literally a beer, and I don't see any impact of it. It's eyeball, to be clear, but I'll have full recovery days according to my Whoop after that. I can't tell the difference between the days where I have a beer and the days that I don't.
Is that beer earlier in the day, or is it later in the day, or it doesn't matter for you?
Just a dinner. So it's about 7 o'clock or so in the evening, and go to bed at around 10 or 11.
Wow. I mean, any fluid intake at 7 o'clock for me is like, there's no way. It's crazy that you can have any fluid intake and not mess with sleep. So,
Okay. Yeah, different things. I don't know. I find that helps me actually. If I have the beer, then I tend to nod off a little bit more and then go to bed earlier. So maybe that's why I'm not seeing the impact, because I'm getting a slightly improved sleep from it.
interesting. Interesting. All right. So we
Although,
covered the list. Well, go.
okay.
Yep.
I'm just going to say, of course, once you get to the heavier consumption of alcohol, it's well known that will then impair sleep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the
So I
dose
think that
that,
maybe.
so you've got the right dose, so that's the key, finding the dose, right?
Yep.
So we covered it all. We covered
Yeah.
it for today.
I think that's enough for today. Yep.
Cool. All right. Until next time, Chris.
Okay. Great to talk to you, Michael.
Ciao.